Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. We begin tonight with the Indian rupee. It continues to slide. It has breached 91 against the US dollar. What is driving the fall? Will India's central bank intervene? And what does it mean for you? We'll discuss all of that. Meanwhile, things are moving fast in Ukraine. Is a peace deal closer than ever? We'll bring you the update. In the United States, Donald Trump may be making a case to attack Venezuela. He has designated the drug fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. We'll explain the implications. Also in focus is the electric vehicle boom losing momentum. How the terrorists who killed people at Australia's Bondi Beach were inspired by the ISIS. We have details of the investigation. Why Prime Minister Modi's visit to Jordan is significant. How Elon Musk has hit a new milestone with a net worth of $600 billion. On Vijay Divas, a history lesson for young Bangladeshis. In North India, a dense fog that has disrupted travel. And finally, why Trump has sued the BBC for $10 billion. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Thailand says Cambodia must announce a ceasefire first to halt the fighting between the two countries. The reignited border conflict has led to deadly clashes. At least 32 people have been killed and nearly 1 million have been displaced. Cambodia is yet to respond to Thailand's demand. Sudan's army chief says he is ready to talk to Donald Trump to end the conflict which has split his country. The announcement came after he visited Saudi Arabia. Recently, Riyadh presented Washington with the Sudan peace plan. Since 2023, the Sudanese army has been fighting the paramilitary forces. The war has killed thousands and displaced millions of people. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is in Israel on a two-day visit. He held talks with his Israeli counterpart. Both sides reiterated their commitment to fighting terrorism. Jaishankar will also meet Israel's President and Prime Minister. His visit comes ahead of Benjamin Netanyahu's proposed trip to India. A European Airlines flight lands in Iraq's capital, Baghdad. It was the first EU airline to land there in 35 years. European Airlines stopped direct flights to Baghdad in the 1990s when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Now the Baghdad-Athens route will operate 2 flights every week. And PSG ordered to pay Kylian Mbappe more than $70 million in unpaid wages and bonuses. Mbappe left the Parisian club in June 2024 to join Real Madrid. Qatar-owned PSG has not said if they intend to appeal this verdict. The Indian rupee continues to slide. It's been falling for 4 straight days now. Today, the rupee dropped below 91 to the US dollar, meaning 1 US dollar was worth 91 Indian rupees, and that is a historic low. Through the day today, the rupee hovered near the 91 mark. It ended with a slight recovery and settled at 90.92. So what's the trigger for this slide? The demand for the US dollar has gone up. Importers are bracing for the long haul. They're hedging. They're buying US dollars in advance. This is to protect themselves from a falling rupee in case the Indian currency weakens further. They're buying more dollars. And at 91, the rupee slide is hard to ignore. It has also triggered speculation. The question is, will the Reserve Bank of India step in? That's India's central bank, the RBI. Will it intervene and stem the slide? So far, it hasn't. The RBI has not made any major public moves, but there are signs that this could change. In fact, it may already be happening. Some reports suggest the RBI has started intervening again and that it has sold some dollars to defend the rupee. But the amounts were small and they could not prevent the fall. So now traders are expecting something bigger, perhaps a more aggressive move from the central bank. Because there is precedent. The RBI defended the rupee in February and then again in October. Then in the month of November, the RBI intervened twice. It sold large amounts of US dollars into the market. This increases the supply of the dollar, it brings down the value of the dollar, and by extension, it props up the Indian rupee. This is how the RBI steadies the currency. It intervenes to break one-way momentum and to remind traders that the rupee is not a currency in free fall. Now, most experts believe that another big intervention could be coming. Of course, there's a flip side to this. If the RBI sells dollars in large amounts, its foreign currency reserves will deplete. So it must make moves carefully. As for the rupee, the trajectory does not look good. This year, the rupee has lost over 6% in value. It's the worst performing currency in Asia. We've been reporting on this for weeks now, and we've told you the reasons for this fall. First, the exit of foreign investors. They are pulling money out of Indian markets. This year, they've withdrawn more than $18 billion. It's the biggest outflow India has seen, $18 billion. Now, how does this hurt the rupee? When investors sell Indian stocks, they take their money out in dollars. So they sell the Indian currency and they buy US dollars. This drives up the demand for the dollar and it pushes the rupee further down. So that's the first hit. The second factor is the trade deadlock. The US has imposed steep tariffs on Indian goods. Despite multiple rounds of talks, there is no trade deal between India and America. And no deal means no relief. So Indian exports face 50% tariffs in the United States. That means Indian exports become expensive for American consumer. Now, when things cost more, people buy less. So India sells fewer goods and earns fewer dollars. But India needs dollars for imports. India needs dollars to buy things like oil, electronics, and fertilizers. And that leads to a problem. India needs dollars, but fewer dollars are coming in. And when something is needed a lot, but not available much, it becomes costly. So each dollar becomes more expensive and the rupee becomes weaker. A trade deal could arrest this slide. India and the US say they are close to a deal. The leaders spoke last week. Prime Minister Modi and US President Trump had a phone call. Top American trade officials also visited India, but there was no breakthrough, no announcement. So there's a lot of speculation around the stalled trade deal, and this has made traders even more nervous. The government on its part says, look at the larger growth story. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman addressed the parliament. She pointed to India's latest GDP numbers. India grew at 8.2% in the last quarter. Credit ratings agencies have upgraded the Indian economy. The minister highlighted all of this and took a dig at President Trump.
Trump said India is a dead economy. What is the central government saying? Sir, while the global growth is 3.2%, India is growing at 8.2% last quarter, becoming the fastest major economy. Can a dead economy grow at 8.2%? Can a dead economy get credit rating upgrades? So constantly looking at someone and saying, oh, he said that, what is it, what do you want to say? Numbers are saying it, sir.
The finance minister says India's fundamentals are solid, there is growth, there is demand, and the world is taking note. But of course, there are risks too. The rupee slide cannot be ignored. At this rate, it will hit our pockets. Imported goods will cost more. From fuel to phones to laptops to foreign education, all of it will cost more. A weak rupee will make everything expensive. Right now, inflation in India is well under control, so there is no need to panic. What we need are calculated moves and careful interventions. Things are moving fast in Ukraine, both on the battlefield and on the talking table. Yesterday, there was some hectic diplomacy in Berlin. Hours and hours of intense talks, and after that, some hope. hope that a peace deal is finally possible. US President Donald Trump sounded very optimistic. He said a deal is closer than ever.
And I think we're closer now, and they will tell you that they're closer now. We had numerous conversations with President Putin of Russia, and I think we're closer now than we have been ever. And we'll see what we can do. We want to save a lot of lives.
Where is this optimism coming from? You can trace it to the talks on Sunday and Monday. On Sunday, Ukraine made a concession. Their President Zelensky dropped his ambition to join NATO. Instead, he asked for bilateral guarantees. Basically, he sought protection from the United States, legal, binding protection. And on Monday, the US agreed to this. American officials are calling it platinum protection. It will take the form of a bilateral treaty, meaning it will have to pass the US Congress. In other words, this is not a Trump promise. This promise will be codified in American law. And what will that include? What will the promise include? Washington has ruled out US troops on the ground. Instead, they want Europe to take the lead.
In terms of security guarantee, we're working with Europe on it. Europe would be a big part of that. And we're working on the security guarantees so the war doesn't start up again. We don't want to have a war start up again.
Frankly, it doesn't add up. Zelensky says he got NATO-like protection, but without US soldiers, it means nothing. Also, this is a limited time offer. If Zelensky takes this deal, he gets the guarantees. If he keeps negotiating, he won't get it. Basically, it's a take it or leave it deal. Now, we don't know what the current deal looks like, but we got some hints from Europe. Their leaders issued a joint statement yesterday. This statement talks about three main things. Number one, European soldiers will deploy in Ukraine. Here's what the statement says, and I'm quoting, Europe-led forces will assist in the regeneration of Ukraine's forces, in securing Ukraine's skies, and in supporting safer seas, including through operating inside Ukraine. Chances are Russia will oppose this. They have consistently rejected European presence in Ukraine. So that's the first point, European soldiers in Ukraine. Number two, Europe wants Russia to compensate Ukraine for war damages. Compensate how? By using Russian funds which are frozen in Europe. We're talking about some $250 billion. This money belongs to Moscow, but it's frozen in European institutions. Europe says give it to Ukraine. Again, this is the sticking point. Russia is not about to give up $250 billion. Which brings us to the final point, and that is territory. Russia is asking Ukraine to surrender Donbas. This is a region in eastern Ukraine. This is where most of the fighting is happening. Russia already controls 88% of Donbas. They want Kiev to give up the remaining 12% as well. And what does Europe say? Well, they're leaving it up to Ukraine. If Zelensky wants to give up Donbas, he can. If he doesn't, that's fine too. That's what Europe is saying. Now, Zelensky knows how tough this issue is. He called discussions on territory a painful one.
I believe that the issue of territories is a painful one because Russia wants what it wants, and we can't go any further because this is a long dialogue. We clearly understand what they want. There has been enough dialogue on territorial issues, and it seems to me that for now we have different positions, to be honest. But I think my colleagues heard my personal position.
The language is interesting. It suggests some sort of compromise by Zelensky. The question is, will it sway Russia? Based on past negotiations, it's very unlikely. Moscow has the dominant position on the battlefield. They will try to drive home that advantage. Reports say the updated deal will be presented to Moscow in days. After that, the ball is in Russia's court. They will be tempted to counter with another proposal. A, because they can hold on militarily. And B, because Trump is losing patience. Like I said, the offer of security guarantees is limited. If the negotiations drag on, Trump may pull out of it. And Ukraine knows this too. They're trying to put some pressure on Russia. Yesterday, Ukraine's military launched an unprecedented attack. They used a sea drone to target a Russian submarine. Take a look at this. That happened in Novorossiysk. It's a Russian port city on the Black Sea. Kiev says it has taken the Russian submarine out of action. Moscow has denied the damage. Nonetheless, the messaging is clear. Ukraine is hoping to raise the stakes on Russia, basically force Moscow to take the new deal. I'm afraid it's a losing strategy because Russia has taken worse hits than this. Each time they have absorbed it and responded in kind. As for the talks, Zelensky must realize a truth. Russia will not give up their battlefield gains on the table. Similarly, Ukraine cannot gain on the table what they lost on the field. Zelensky has come very close to understanding this truth. It's a matter of making that final leap.
Classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction.
We were seeing a lot of these.
Have you heard of WMDs, weapons of mass destruction? It's a radioactive phrase in US politics. For most people, WMD triggers one image, and that is the war in Iraq. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq. It killed thousands of people, all on the pretext of finding WMDs. Their president was George W. Bush. He claimed that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, so he started the war. Iraq was devastated, its oil was looted, its dictator Saddam Hussein was toppled, but those weapons were never found. Now, 22 years later, another American president is talking about WMDs, and that is Donald Trump. But when he says weapons of mass destruction, Trump is not talking about bombs or missiles. He's talking about drugs, specifically fentanyl.
With this historic executive order I will sign today, we're formally classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction, which is what it is. No bomb does what this is doing. 200 to 300,000 people die every year that we know of. So we're formally classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction.
So Trump says fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction. It kills thousands of Americans every year. And what is fentanyl? It's a synthetic opioid. It was originally developed as a medical painkiller, but people started using it as a drug. And that's a problem for many reasons. You see, fentanyl is extremely powerful. It is around 50 times stronger than heroin. And that means even a few milligrams, a very small quantity of this drug can be fatal. What's worse, it is rarely sold on its own. It is usually mixed with a host of other drugs, so users tend to overdose on it. And that proves to be fatal. The numbers are alarming. Last year, fentanyl killed around 48,000 people in the United States. But Trump, being Trump, has exaggerated the crisis. He says 200,000 to 300,000 people, 2 to 3 lakh people die every year.
If this were a war, that would be one of the worst wars. I believe they killed, over the last 5 or 6 years, per year, 200 to 300,000 people. You hear about 100,000, which is a lot of people, but the number is much higher than that. That's been proven. And they've destroyed a lot of families. Because when they lose a child, or even if their child is heavily addicted, you lose that family. The family will never be the same.
Irrespective of the numbers, he has a point. The drug menace has gone out of hand. But how does it help if you start calling it a WMD, a weapon of mass destruction? How does that help? Well, it helps because in the US law, WMD falls in a special category, in the same bracket as chemical weapons, biological agents, radiation devices, and massive explosives. Basically, things that are designed to kill on a mass scale, things that are used to wage war. Now, President Trump said that fentanyl is proving to be deadlier than bombs. So he signed an executive order and labeled it as WMD. That makes fentanyl trafficking a national security threat. It directs prosecutors to go harder on traffickers, it pushes for financial crackdowns, and it describes drug networks as enemies of the state. The intent is pretty clear. But so is the law. Trump cannot decide what's a WMD, only the US Congress can. Unless they put fentanyl in that category, Trump's order makes little difference. Then why has he done it? Because that's what American presidents do. They change the language when they cannot change the law. And we've seen this movie before. In 2003, the US invaded Iraq over one central claim, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Those weapons, like I said, were never found. But in the process, a country was destroyed and a region was destabilized. On 15 December 2011, the US officially ended the war in Iraq. And now, 14 years and 1 day later, Washington is back with the same charge, featuring weapons of mass destruction. And who is the enemy this time? It's Venezuela. Interestingly, it's another oil-rich country. Trump has been targeting Venezuela for months now. He has openly threatened land attacks inside Venezuela. He has deployed a lot of military assets near its coast, and throughout, the Americans have given one reason for this, that they're only fighting drug traffickers.
I want those boats taken out, and if we have to, we'll attack on land also, just like we attack on sea. And there's very little coming in by sea. I think we've knocked out over 90% of it. There's very little, and I understand that.
Now, here's the problem with this story. Venezuela is not a fentanyl hub. South America in general is not central to fentanyl production. Yet President Trump has decided that they are the villains. Venezuelan president/dictator Nicolas Maduro claims that this campaign has nothing to do with drugs. It's about regime change. And while it's a fact that Maduro is a dictator who has rigged elections and given a raw deal to his people, unseating him is not America's prerogative. Washington does not get to decide which dictator is ousted and which one is toasted. But it does, over and over again. It did the same in Iraq. Also, calling fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction serves three purposes for Washington. One, it shifts the crisis from public health to national security. Two, it reframes uncertainty as urgency. And three, it lowers the political cost of extreme action. So yes, fentanyl is a real crisis. People are dying in very large numbers, but calling it a weapon of mass destruction is a political decision. And the moment you use the term WMD, you stop looking for treatment. You're only looking for targets now. Our next story is about electric cars. For years, they've been touted as the future of transport. For years, governments have pushed for them and car makers have promised them. But now many of them are going slow because the economic reality is setting in. Take Europe, for example. Europe had set a hard deadline, 2035. Ban all petrol and diesel cars by 2035. That's what Europe had decided 2 years back. It was part of their flagship Green Deal. The idea was to achieve zero emissions, move away from petrol and diesel cars and shift to electric vehicles completely. But now there's a rethink. Europe may soften the ban on petrol and diesel cars. What does that mean? What is softening a ban? Instead of cutting emissions to zero, car makers may have to cut them by 90%. And what happens to the remaining 10%? This is to allow some petrol and hybrid vehicles on the road, even after 2035. That's the 10% allowance. Now, Germany and Italy pushed for this change more than anyone else. They're home to some of Europe's biggest car makers like Volkswagen, BMW, Stellantis, and Renault. And here's why they want to go easy on the ban. There are multiple reasons, in fact. The first reason is consumer demand. European automakers say people are not buying electric cars fast enough. And for very practical reasons. EVs are still more expensive than petrol or diesel cars, so for many buyers, they're not affordable. And that makes a total ban hard to enforce. That's the first reason. The second reason is intense competition from China, and this is a big one. China dominates the electric car market. More than half of all EVs sold the world over come from China. You see, Beijing subsidizes EV makers. It brings down their costs, so Chinese electric cars are much cheaper. And that's why they sell more. European automakers say they cannot match China on price. The third reason is jobs. The car industry is one of Europe's biggest employers. Governments fear that moving too fast on the ban could shut factories and wipe out jobs. So Europe is hitting the brakes. But this trend is not limited to Europe. Global EV growth is slowing. In November, global EV sales rose by just 6%. That was the slowest growth rate since early 2024. Plus, consumer sentiment has also shifted. A new survey is out. This is what it says. Half of global car buyers now plan to buy petrol or diesel vehicles. Only 14% want a fully electric car. Clearly, enthusiasm for EVs is cooling and car makers are taking the cues. Look at Ford Motors. It has announced a major retreat from electric vehicles. The company is taking a hit of nearly $20 billion. $20 billion. Ford says its electric car bets have not worked as planned. Big EVs are too expensive to build and too hard to sell. Another reason, of course, is Donald Trump. His administration has pulled back support for EVs. So all of this has pushed Ford to retreat from electric vehicles. And here's what the company is doing. It is shifting focus back to petrol and hybrid cars. And it has put its flagship project on hold. Again, this trend is not limited to Ford. Even for luxury brands, EVs are proving hard to sell. I'm talking about companies like Porsche and Mercedes-Benz. Despite a wealthy customer base, they have struggled to scale up EV sales. So if you join the dots, what do you see? What does all of this mean? Well, it does not mean that electric cars are going away. They're not. And this is not a collapse of EVs. What this means is that the transition is turning out to be much slower, much more expensive and more politically sensitive than what governments and companies had expected. Electric cars may still very well be the future, but the route to get there is proving to be far longer and far more complicated than promised. Now let's bring you an update from Australia from the terror attack at Bondi Beach in Sydney. The investigation is picking up. We know more about the attackers now. Sajid and Naveed Akram, a father-son duo. They carried out the massacre on Bondi Beach. The father, Sajid, is an Indian national. He was born in Hyderabad. He still holds an Indian passport. His son Naveed was born in Australia. He is an Australian citizen. Together, they traveled to Mindanao in the Philippines. This was just weeks before the attack. And this detail is crucial because Mindanao in the Philippines is a known terror hotspot. Investigators believe that the two terrorists may have been radicalized there. Here's a report.
The Sydney terror attack continues to shock Australia. And now, we know more about the men behind it. The shooting at Bondi Beach left 16 people dead. It's the worst mass shooting in Australia in nearly 30 years. Two men were behind it, a father and son, Sajid and Naveed Akram. Sajid Akram was 50. His son Naveed was just 24. Both lived in Sydney. But their roots go beyond Australia. Sajid Akram was born in Hyderabad, India. He moved to Australia in 1998, nearly 27 years ago. He married a European origin woman and settled in Sydney. He still holds an Indian passport. His children, including Naveed, were born in Australia. They are Australian citizens. So what we have here is an Indian national father and an Australian-born son. Together, they are accused of carrying out a terror attack in Sydney. Police say the shooting was inspired by ISIS ideology, a homegrown attack, but driven by global radicalism. Sajid ran a fruit shop in the suburbs. Naveed worked as a bricklayer. They lived in Bonnyrigg, a quiet suburb in West Sydney. They blended in, stayed under the radar, but behind closed doors, they were radicalizing. Police say they weren't part of any wider terror group. No handlers, no money trail, just two men plotting in silence. And that's what makes this case so chilling. But there were signs. Naveed was flagged back in 2019. He had links to two other men who were later convicted in a terror case. At the time, he didn't seem like a threat. The case was closed. Now, that decision is being questioned. The turning point may have come this year. In November, the Akrams flew to the Philippines. They entered the country together. Sajid used his Indian passport. Naveed used his Australian one. They said they were heading to Davao, on the island of Mindanao. That's a region with a long history of Islamic insurgency. It's where ISIS-aligned groups once seized an entire city. The Akrams stayed there for nearly a month. They left on November 28th and returned to Sydney. Officials now believe this trip was key. They may have been trained or radicalized there.
It would appear that there is evidence that this was inspired by a terrorist organisation, by ISIS. Now, some of the evidence which is being procured, including the presence of Islamic State flags in the vehicle that has been seized, are a part of that. Radical perversion of Islam is absolutely a problem. It is something that has been identified globally as a problem as well. ISIS is created by an evil ideology that has been called out not just by the Australian government but globally as well.
Back home, the planning began. They chose their moment carefully. The attack was carried out during Hanukkah, a Jewish holiday. Their targets were Jewish Australians. They opened fire on a crowded walkway. Naveed started shooting from a bridge. Sajid followed minutes later. It was over in minutes. 16 people killed, dozens wounded, an entire country stunned with the global spotlight on Australia. The investigation is moving fast, but many questions remain. How did two men plan this without getting caught? Why wasn't their trip to Mindanao flagged earlier? And how many more are slipping through the cracks? This was not a foreign network, not a cross-border operation. It was a father and son, radicalized at home, driven by ideology, and capable of mass violence. It's the kind of terror case that's hardest to predict, and even harder to stop.
December is holiday season across the world, but in diplomacy, it's a hectic month. We see major conferences, summits and year-end trips, and it's no different here in India. Prime Minister Modi is wrapping up 2025 with a three-nation trip. He is visiting Jordan, Ethiopia and Oman. His first trip was Jordan. The Prime Minister landed in Amman yesterday. Amman is the capital of Jordan. He was welcomed at the airport by Jordan's Prime Minister. Take a look. Now, Jordan is a kingdom in West Asia. It is ruled by the influential Hashemite family. They trace their ancestry to the Prophet Muhammad. The current king, Abdullah II, is the 41st direct descendant of the Prophet. He is a very close ally of the United States. King Abdullah hosted Prime Minister Modi for talks later in the day. The Prime Minister focused on three main issues. He praised Jordan's efforts to end the Gaza war. He appreciated King Abdullah's crackdown on terrorism, and he called for deepening economic ties.
गाजा पर शुरुआत से ही आपकी बहुत सक्रिय और सकारात्मक भूमिका रही है। हम सभी की आशा है कि क्षेत्र में शांति और स्थिरता बनी रहे। आतंकवाद के विरुद्ध हमारा साझा और स्पष्ट रुख है। आपके नेतृत्व में जॉर्डन ने आतंकवाद, उग्रवाद और रेडिकलाइजेशन के खिलाफ पूरी मानवता को एक सशक्त और रणनीतिक संदेश दिए हैं।
This is actually Prime Minister Modi's first full trip to Jordan. He made a transit stop back in 2018, but this one was a full-fledged diplomatic visit. The question is why now and what did it achieve? Well, Jordan plays a key role in the Israel-Palestine conflict. They recognized the State of Israel back in 1994, and since then, Jordan has been a key channel of communication. And that continued during the Gaza war as well. King Abdullah was closely involved in the peace talks. Safe to say, any deal with Palestine will involve Jordan. Beyond that, there are bilateral reasons too. This year marked the 75th anniversary of India-Jordan ties. Around 17,000 Indians live in Jordan, plus it's a key exporter of fertilizers to India. All of this makes Jordan a crucial partner in West Asia. Which brings us to the second question. What did this trip achieve? Well, first of all, the symbolism. Prime Minister Modi has met the Jordanian king multiple times, but this time he interacted with the next generation as well. That's Crown Prince Hussein. He personally drove Prime Minister Modi to the Jordan Museum and he gave him a tour of the whole place and finally saw him off at the airport. Some warm gestures there. It shows rising comfort in India-Jordan ties. Now to the outcomes. India and Jordan signed 5 agreements, 1 on renewable energy, 2 on water management, 3 a twinning agreement between Petra and Ellora. Both are UNESCO heritage sites, Petra in Jordan and Ellora, of course, in India. Basically, they will share conservation tips and protocols. 4, a deal on cultural exchange programs, and 5 on digital cooperation. Those are the 5 agreements that were signed yesterday. Then today, there was a business forum. Both Prime Minister Modi and King Abdullah addressed it. The Indian Prime Minister focused on 2 key issues. First, he invited investors to make bets on India to make the most of India's rapid growth. And secondly, he offered joint projects and cooperation, ranging from rebuilding in Syria to railways in Jordan. Listen in.
आप सभी जानते हैं कि भारत 3rd लार्जेस्ट इकोनॉमी की ओर तेजी से बढ़ रहा है। भारत की ग्रोथ रेट 8% से ऊपर है। भारत की तेज ग्रोथ में आप सहयोगी बन सकते हैं। हिज मैजेस्टी ने जॉर्डन में रेलवे और नेक्स्ट जनरेशन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनाने का विजन साझा किया है। मैं उनको विश्वास दिलाना चाहता हूं कि हमारी कंपनियां उनके विजन को साकार करने के लिए सक्षम भी हैं और उत्सुक भी हैं। कल हमारी मुलाकात में हिज मैजेस्टी ने सीरिया में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर रिकंस्ट्रक्शन की जरूरतों के बारे में भी बताया। भारत और जॉर्डन की कंपनीज इन जरूरतों को पूरा करने पर मिलकर काम कर सकती हैं।
King Abdullah also proposed an ambitious plan. He wants a corridor from India to Jordan, one that will connect West Asia to South Asia.
With Jordan's strategic location and FTAs, and with India's economic power and advanced industries, we have the potential to build an economic corridor that links South Asia to the Middle East, Africa, and Europe.
The 2 leaders have unveiled a roadmap on trade. Their goal is to double the current levels. Today, bilateral trade stands at $2.3 billion. The target is to take it to $5 billion by 2030. Another key mission is on technology. India is hoping to share its experience in digital public infrastructure. We are talking about things like UPI and Aadhaar. Of course, beyond all of this lies the strategic relevance. Jordan is a key player in the Arab world. It is the custodian of Islam's 3rd holiest site, which is the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And for India, Jordan is a crucial bridge for connectivity. We've told you about the IMEC project. That's the India Middle East Economic Corridor, IMEC. It seeks to connect India to Europe via ships, trains and roads. Now, without Jordan, there is no IMEC, because Jordan connects Saudi Arabia to Israel and the Mediterranean. And all of this makes the India-Jordan partnership quite significant. That is why Prime Minister Modi made this trip. It is not a reset or an outreach, it's doubling down on an existing partner. There are numbers we hear every day, and then there are numbers that stop you. $600 billion is one such figure. $600 billion, that's Elon Musk's net worth, one man's net worth, $600 billion. No individual has ever reached this level before, and this surge did not come from Tesla, his car company. It came from SpaceX, his rocket company. SpaceX is a private company that builds rockets, launches satellites, and runs the Starlink internet service. Elon Musk owns about 42% of this company, SpaceX, and earlier this month, SpaceX signed a deal. It increased the company's value to around $800 billion, and that automatically raised Elon Musk's net worth. Our next report explains how this happened and what this number really means.
$600 billion. A number this big usually belongs to governments. It funds roads, defense forces, welfare, and entire economies. But now, it belongs to a single person, Elon Musk. Yes! According to Forbes, Musk has become the first person in history to cross a net worth of $600 billion. That value is bigger than the GDP of many countries across the world. But this staggering net worth did not come from selling more cars or from new product launches. It came from Musk's company SpaceX. Earlier this month, SpaceX carried out a private insider share sale. This was not a public stock trade. It was a deal between existing shareholders and new investors. The transaction valued the company at around $800 billion. That is nearly double what the company was valued at earlier this year. Musk owns an estimated 42% of SpaceX. So when SpaceX was revalued, his personal wealth surged with it. Forbes estimates that this single move added roughly $168 billion to his net worth. That jump alone pushed his net worth well past the $600 billion mark. It also placed him far beyond every other billionaire. So why is SpaceX suddenly worth so much? Because it is edging closer to an IPO. An IPO is an initial public offering. It is when a private company opens its shares to public investors for the first time. SpaceX is preparing for a public listing as early as 2026. Investors believe that listing could value SpaceX at more than $1 trillion. Some estimates go even higher. But why this massive valuation? SpaceX dominates commercial space launches. Its Starlink satellite network is generating billions in revenue, and it holds lucrative government contracts. That would make it one of the largest IPOs in history. But here is an important detail. $600 billion of net worth does not mean $600 billion in cash. Musk does not have that money sitting in a bank account. Most of his wealth exists on paper. It is tied to shares and private valuations. When SpaceX, Tesla, or any of his other companies are repriced, his net worth moves instantly. This happens even if nothing changes in his daily life. To access real money, he must sell shares or borrow against them. That is how he bought Twitter, now called X, in 2022. And that puts the number in perspective. $600 billion is not cash, but it is a reflection of how markets value companies, ideas, and future expectations. At this scale, net worth becomes less about spending and more about ownership and influence. And it raises an important question. How much wealth is too much? when one person's net worth rivals the economic output of entire nations.
Today is a monumental day for our region, a day that changed the face of South Asia, a day that broke up Pakistan, a day that birthed a new country. On this day in 1971, Pakistan's military surrendered to India. All it took was 13 days. Just 13 days to overpower Pakistan. Some 93,000 of their soldiers, surrendered in East Pakistan, or as it's called today, Bangladesh. Here in India, we celebrate it as Vijay Divas. Over in Bangladesh, it's Victory Day. Different language, same meaning. I'm sure a lot of you know about the backstory, about what happened in the lead up to 1971. But this story is not for you. It's for young Bangladeshis. And you know there are a lot of them. Almost 25% of the population of Bangladesh is under 30 years of age. The events of 1971 happened more than 50 years ago. So it's important that we tell this story. It's a quick history lesson. We begin our story in 1947. British India was partitioned into two. Pakistan became a country of two parts, West Pakistan and East Pakistan. And in between them, hundreds of kilometers of Indian land. Immediately after 1947, problems emerged. East and West Pakistan had virtually nothing in common. Yes, they were both Muslim-dominated regions, but beyond that, there was nothing. In 1948, Pakistan's new leaders tried to impose Urdu on the country. This is despite people in the East speaking Bengali. They wanted everyone to speak Urdu, and this led to years of protests. Finally, in 1956, both Bengali and Urdu were recognized. But by now, the fire had been lit. West Pakistan continued to impose its culture on the East. For example, they discouraged the sari. It's a traditional attire worn by women in India. So Pakistan wanted to curb it. They also banned works of prominent Bengali artists. All of this was intended to suppress East Pakistan, and it wasn't limited to culture. Look at the parliament and elections. Pakistan's constitution had promised equal seats to the East and West, but in 1958, that promise was revoked. Pakistan's military leaders focused on draining the East, heavy taxes, low public spending, and no financial aid. The policy was to use East Pakistan's resources to enrich the West. Soon rebellion began to brew. It was led by the Awami League political party, that's the party of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of Sheikh Hasina. In 1966, he demanded economic and political autonomy. Not independence, autonomy. But West Pakistan rejected it. Then in 1970, a deadly cyclone hit East Pakistan. More than 300,000 people were killed in the East. Again, no help came from Islamabad. This led to a lot of anger. And that anger boiled over when elections were held. So the Awami League won 167 out of 169 seats in East Pakistan. They got an outright majority in the parliament. Ideally, Sheikh Mujib should have been prime minister, but in Pakistan's long-standing tradition, he was kept out. This triggered massive outrage in East Pakistan. Dozens of protests and marches were held. So in March 1971, Islamabad launched a crackdown. It was called Operation Searchlight. The Pakistani army unleashed untold horrors on the people. Up to 400,000 women were sexually assaulted and enslaved. More than 3 million people were brutally killed, and 15 million were forced to flee. This is the legacy of Pakistan in present-day Bangladesh, a legacy steeped in blood, torture, and rape. As the crisis grew, India stepped in. First, the Indian military trained Bengali fighters. Then, on December 3rd, India joined the war. Our naval fleet attacked Karachi, our fighter planes bombed locations in Dhaka, and our soldiers pushed towards the capital. As India's victory became evident, the United States tried to intervene. They sent their 7th Fleet to intimidate New Delhi. Yet the Indian army pushed on. Within 13 days, the Pakistani military surrendered in Dhaka. Bangladesh was a free country. This is the history that some have forgotten. Indian and Bangladeshi soldiers bled together on the battlefield. Together they fought and defeated a common enemy, Pakistan. But look at the situation today. Symbols of that war are being targeted and Indian leaders are being mocked. Today, effigies of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi were burnt in Dhaka. Meanwhile, Pakistani generals are welcomed warmly. These generals openly call Sheikh Mujibur Rahman a traitor to the nation, yet the government in Dhaka says nothing. Is this what remains of the 1971 legacy? We hope not. The ties between our two countries are not just about politics. They're about language, food and festivals, about movies and literature, about familiarity and family. From India's side, that has not changed, but in Bangladesh it clearly has. Your new rulers may topple statues and edit textbooks, but none of that changes history. Bangladesh and India are tied by borders and brethren. It's up to you to learn that truth and fight for it. Our next story is about dense winter fog. It has disrupted daily life across North India. Flights have been cancelled or delayed across major airports in the country. In Delhi alone, hundreds of flights have been affected over the past 2 days. But this disruption is not limited to airports. It has spread to roads, highways and expressways. Across North India, they've turned dangerous. Poor visibility has triggered fatal road accidents. Authorities say foggy conditions may continue to prevail and travellers have been urged to remain cautious. Here's a report.
Dense fog has once again returned to large parts of North India. And Delhi has been at the centre of the disruption caused by it. Fog settled over the city late on Sunday night. Visibility dropped sharply by early Monday morning. In some areas, it fell to zero. That is when the chaos began. Air travel was hit first. At Delhi's airport, departures were suspended for hours on Monday morning. Planes could not take off safely. Runways became unusable. Across northern India, at least 300 flights were cancelled due to low visibility. At Delhi airport alone, more than 200 flights were cancelled on Monday. Hundreds more were delayed. Several flights were diverted to other cities. By the time visibility improved later in the day, schedules had already collapsed. But the chaos did not end there. On Tuesday morning, disruptions continued. At least 126 flights were affected at the Delhi airport. Airport authorities said operations were improving, but airlines warned that fog could still hamper flights. Passengers were advised to check their flight status before travelling. So why did the fog cause such widespread disruption? Because fog affects more than visibility. It disrupts how airports operate. Only pilots trained for very low visibility can land in dense fog. Others have to wait for the conditions to improve. That creates queues of aircraft on taxiways. And once flights are delayed, the impact spreads quickly. The dense fog arrived at a difficult moment for the national capital. Delhi was already grappling with poor air quality. Cold and still air trapped pollutants near the ground. Smog mixed with fog, further reducing clarity in the air. This made breathing conditions worse for the city. But the chaos caused by fog was not limited to the aviation sector. On the roads, the fog turned deadly. Across the North Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, dense fog led to multiple road accidents. Many of these crashes were fatal, with multiple lives lost. Most occurred in the early morning hours. Drivers struggled to see what lay ahead. Several crashes involved multi-vehicle pile-ups on highways and expressways. Some vehicles even caught fire after collisions. Police said the accidents were linked to foggy conditions. The weather department has warned that dense fog may continue, especially during early morning hours across North India. Advisories have been issued, airlines are urging caution, and commuters are being asked to slow down and avoid unnecessary travel. This is not just a weather story. It's about how fog, pollution, and infrastructure collide, and how quickly daily life can grind to a halt.
Donald Trump is obsessed with television, and I'm not the one saying this. Everyone around him says this. The US president loves watching TV. He spends between 4 to 8 hours every day watching television. 4 to 8 hours in a day. No one can touch the remote. There are TVs all over the White House. Trump loves watching TV and being on TV. He loves interviews. He's hooked to social media. It's fair to say that he's obsessed with the media. But this is a love-hate relationship because he also loves to sue the media. His latest target is the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. Trump is suing the BBC for up to $10 billion. $10 billion. The BBC says it will defend itself.
They actually have me speaking with words that I never said, and they got caught because I believe somebody at BBC said, this is so bad, it has to be reported. That's called fake news. So we'll be filing that suit probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
So what is this lawsuit about? And can Trump win this case? The story goes back to late 2024, just days before the US presidential election. The BBC aired a documentary. It was aired only in the United Kingdom. It was titled Trump, a Second Chance? The documentary looked back at Trump's political life. At the center of it was January 6, 2021. That's the day of the US Capitol riots. Trump made a speech that morning near the White House. The BBC used footage from that speech, but it stitched together lines from two different parts of the speech. These lines were delivered nearly 1 hour apart, but the documentary made it look like Trump said it at the same time, and that completely changed the message. It implied that Trump had asked his supporters to march to the Capitol.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
The BBC edit leaves out an important part, the part where Trump asked his supporters to be peaceful. So basically, the BBC edit created a particular impression that Trump had instigated the rioters. The broadcaster later admitted it was a mistake. Senior executives resigned. The BBC apologized. Internal memos were leaked. They called it an error in judgment.
I think the real issue here was the impression left that the President Trump, in his 6th of January speech, had encouraged, called to violent action. And what we had to apologize for was that, as well as the splicing of the edit. It's my view that editing interviews is a normal journalistic practice. So that in itself is not what the problem was. The problem was the impression that it led, that it was an impression that President Trump had called for direct violent action, and that wasn't the case, and that is what I thought needed to be apologized for.
So the BBC apologized in their own roundabout way, but they refused to do the one thing that Trump demanded. They refused to pay him. That's where the lawsuit comes in. Trump's lawsuit demands damages up to $10 billion. The claims are sweeping: defamation, deceptive trade practices, and malicious misrepresentation. This is what he's charging the BBC for. And then there are bigger claims. Trump argues that it was all political, that the speech was aired right before the US election. It was used to influence American voters. The fact is, the documentary was aired in the United Kingdom, not the United States. The BBC says it did not distribute it to its American audiences, but Trump says US citizens could have watched it anyway. Now, all of this is going to be very hard to prove in a court of law. Trump does not just have to prove that the edit was wrong, he has to prove actual malice, which raises the obvious question. If this case is so hard to win, why file it at all? Well, to understand that, you have to zoom out. The BBC is not the only media corporation that Donald Trump is suing. Trump has sued almost every major media organization that has challenged him. In 2022, he sued the CNN for around $475 million. It likened him to Adolf Hitler. That lawsuit was dismissed. In October 2024, Trump sued CBS for $20 billion. He alleged deceptive editing of an interview of his 2024 opponent, Kamala Harris. CBS's parent company is Paramount Skydance. In July this year, they agreed to settle the lawsuit and they paid $16 billion. Again in July, Trump sued the Wall Street Journal. This was over reports of a letter he sent to Jeffrey Epstein. Trump wants Wall Street Journal to pay him $10 billion. In September, he sued the New York Times. This was for $15 billion. Trump says the New York Times is acting like a mouthpiece for the Democrats. So you get the gist. Trump loves his lawsuits against the media. Legally, most of them are long shots. But politically, these lawsuits are incredibly effective. They allow Donald Trump to frame himself as the victim of a corrupt press. They energize his voter base, they raise money, they scare executives, they change newsroom behavior, and they test the limits of press freedom, not by banning speech outright, but by making it expensive, risky, and very personal. Technically, Donald Trump does not need to win every case. He just needs the media to blink. And this lawsuit against the BBC may fail too. It may drag on or it may quietly disappear. But the message has already been sent that in Trump's America, the media is no longer just reporting the story, it is the story. Today was the IPL mini auction, or as Pakistan's Cricket League calls it, a mega auction. Some 350 players went under the hammer, but all the focus was on one Australian all-rounder. His name is Cameron Green. He was bought for a whopping 25 crore rupees. That's around $2.7 million US. Of course, that's the rate today. The way the rupee is falling, you never know. If I was Green, I would be encashing fast. Either way, the massive bid triggered a lot of jokes and memes online. Even the IPL teams joined in on the fun. Take a look. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Mexican lawmakers pull each other's hair and throw punches during a city Congress session. Vatican lights up a giant Christmas tree and nativity scene in St. Peter's Square. And runners in Antarctica complete their first ever backwards mile. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2012, the 23-year-old physiotherapy student was gang raped by 6 men on a moving bus in Delhi. This incident took the national capital and the country by shock. She later died of her injuries. 6 people were arrested for the attack. 4 of them were convicted of gang rape and murder in 2013. They were later sentenced to death and hanged. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.